Welcome back to A Writer's Mind. I am your host, DelSheree Spinner. Part of the reason it's been so long since I have posted a new episode is the name change. A big chunk of the end of the summer and into August was taken up with getting our wedding plans finalized and then actually getting married. And then we just, had a whole bunch more busyness and all kinds of stuff going on with the kids. Yeah, it was a lot. And once again, it's been a while. I have actually been doing some writing. I just have not had the time nor the space to actually sit down and record anything. So I will be catching up over the next little bit. I've gotten a new start on the Karmic book, which is what I'm going to talk about today. It's just a short start, but I kind of wanted to just get into it and give an update because it's been an interesting restart with this book. I just kind of dived in and was just, I thought about it for a while and kind of how I was wanting to set things. And I wrote out 5 pages of notes on what the world was going to be like, how it's going to work, goals, kind of series long things. I wanted to do some world building ahead of time. So I wasn't getting stuck so much on how is this actually going to work? Am I going to be able to connect all the dots later as far as how the karmic world operates? And I kind of added some interesting details that I hadn't had before that I think are really going to help with making this feel more complete and realistic in the sense of, obviously it's not real, but that things would come together in a way that is logical and sensible while suspending our disbelief, obviously. So in the original version, I only had 2 worlds, the karmic world and the human world, our world where we live in. So it was going to be 2 parallel dimensions. And one of the problems I was having with figuring out what to do with the original storyline was part of it was establishing the stakes and having that make sense and having there be not just this otherworldly karmic issue where things would go haywire once in a while. And also, I wasn't liking that it was kind of making humans the villains. Because yes, obviously there are plenty of humans in the world who just outright suck and ruin things for everybody else. But I didn't like the attitude that humans in general were bad and that they were unwittingly destroying the karmic world. I felt like we needed something more. And a lot of this, as I talked this over with my husband, Chris, like I've said before, he is super good at brainstorming and asking me the right questions and prodding my thoughts so that I dig a little deeper and start making connections. And he always has good suggestions to think about. So through a lot of this brainstorming, one of the major changes from the original idea is that there are now going to be 3 dimensions. So we have the human world, we have the karmic world, which one day I'll figure out a name for, and then we're also going to have I just have it written in my notes as not karmic. You wouldn't think I'm a writer based on how terrible I am at coming up with names for things. But for right now, it's called the not karmic world. It will have a better name eventually. But basically, this is the antagonist world. So the karmic world has their agents. They're trying to keep balance between everything, while the agents of the not karmic world are actually the ones who are instigating a lot of the problems. So just like our character from the original storyline, she's coming to investigate and try to fix the karmic disruption. This not karmic world is also going to have agents that they send into the human world. And they are causing the disruptions. They're influencing humans who already kind of have a predilection toward doing not so great things or who have issues or who are in volatile situations. And they will push and nudge. And sometimes this is in the moment thing. And sometimes they're in there for the long game. And they're building this up over time. So there's going to be different kind of skill levels with their agents depending on what they can do. And so I've also added where what they can do and how they can influence humans is going to be dependent on what they can actually do within the rules of the world. So with the not karmic people, I need to come up with a good name. So the not karmic people, they're more unstable in their makeup because they are chaotic, whereas the karmic people, they're the stability. The karmic people are the stability between these three different dimensions, and humans are kind of the ones that can go either way, depending on how they're influenced. So the not karmic people, because of their instability, they can only inhabit humans for generally short periods of time. If they're really skilled, if they have a lot of experience, they can do this for longer, or they can stick with one person, inhabit them briefly, but do this multiple times, like over years even maybe, to kind of develop a person into what they want them to be, and this leads them to do the things that they want them to do. The karmic people don't really do this. They're not trying to create change necessarily. They're just trying to keep the balance. So kind of this difference in what they view as their role within these three connected worlds really changes what they do and how they interact with things. So the non-karmic people are trying to create more chaos and instability, while the karmic people are trying to keep things stable and keep the humans kind of being generally decent. They don't have too high of hopes, but they would like it if they're not all running around murdering each other and doing crazy stuff. So the not karmic people, they kind of see it as like their purpose, their job to create chaos. Like that's just what they do. They're not necessarily evil, but that is their purpose. And so our karmic character kind of sees them that way as well. And I'll introduce at some point, I'm not sure that it'll be in the first book. I think it might be in a second, maybe toward the end of the second book, where we're actually going to meet a non-karmic character, and they're kind of going to be a friend of Beatrix, where she just sees them as kind of this coworker, I guess not coworker, but this like her counterpart in a different company. If you were two people are working in a marketing firm, they're not necessarily going to think the other person's evil because they work for a different firm, but they have their own clients, they have their own purpose. So she's kind of more nuanced in her understanding of how all of these three worlds work together. She kind of sees it as like, well, we need some level of chaos that keeps the humans going and motivated, and it keeps variety. Like if everything was the same and boring, that would probably cause its own issues within the karmic ether that connects these three worlds. So she sees them as needed, but that they need to be kept in check. And she is part of keeping them in check. And so, she sees it kind of on this like weird professional level. And that's not how a lot of her other people see it. Like her boss, Cal, is very vindictive and petty. And he definitely sees the non-karmic people as evil and they must be overcome and destroyed. And he kind of thinks like, no, yeah, if we got rid of all of them, then everything would be fine. And then we wouldn't really need to keep an eye on things. Obviously, humans in general, we're not amazing at times. So humans can cause their own problems without the non-karmic people stepping in and making things worse. But so there is going to be kind of this interplay between the two worlds. In book one, like I said, I don't think we'll get too much into the actual karmic character and her relationship with this other individual, but there'll be hints about it, and she'll discuss some of the interplay between things. One of the other things that I think I mentioned previously was that without the mystery element, when I had the two stories combined, I didn't know how to share all of the information about the karmic world, and now with the other dimension as well. How do we get all that information to the reader without info dumping and making it boring and just being like, and here's how this works, blah, 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 blah. So I've decided to make a change to how the karmic agents interact with their human hosts. In the original version, once Beatrix took over a human's body, like they were basically like wrapped up in a ball of karmic goo. Their soul was wobbled up in a little tight ball, so they couldn't interact at all. And that was kind of an author-created issue because I wanted Beatrix to have to figure out the mystery and not be able to just, dig into Sage's thoughts and figure things out that way, because that would be too easy, and then that's not a very interesting story. But it created other problems of like, well, why can't she just do that? That didn't really make any sense. So instead of the agent being put into the body of the person who's causing the disturbance, when an agent is sent into the human world, they don't necessarily know who's causing the disturbance. They just know there is one, and they kind of know the general area. And so they'll be put into a human body in the vicinity of the disturbance. And then the agent has to kind of track down what's going on. Agents can switch between bodies now, kind of as they need to. They can jump from one person to the other. And I decided they can also interact with the human that they are inhabiting. They still have control of the human's bodies and actions and decision makings, but there is going to be some dialogue between the agent and whoever they are in control of at the time. This is going to help explain things that won't make sense to a human. There are some limits to that. Like, I open this chapter, the beginning of the book, she is dropped into a human body, like just in the middle of something. And so she kind of gets shoved in out of nowhere. Her boss, Cal, like I said, he's still going to be a petty, spiteful, little annoying person. And so he intentionally tries to make each case as hard as possible on Beatrix. And so he's like, oh, it's a rush. You have to go right now. Something's happening. You've got to get in there. And so he basically like shoves her out of the karmic world into this human body. And this is not like a process that humans are used to, obviously. So it kind of stuns the person who has just had a karmic soul shoved into them. So it'll probably depend on like the person, but there's going to be a period of time where the karmic agent is kind of acclimating to the body, and the human mind is just like too overwhelmed to interact, and they're going to wake up slowly. This kind of preserves the human mind, because that would be really shocking if that were real. But it also creates a problem where when Beatrix is shoved into this human body, she is in front of a classroom of fourth graders, and she has no idea what she's doing there or what's going on. She can't really access the human's memories very well, and so she kind of is just dumped in this situation as we start off the book, where she's supposed to be, as she learns eventually, giving a talk for career day to these little fourth graders, and she's having to like scrounge through the little bits of memories as they're freeing up, as this human body is kind of like over or coming out of the shock of her taking over. And so she makes a mess of it, obviously, trying to open with a little bit of humor. And I'm going to try to carry some humor through this book. I might need Chris's help on that because he is way funnier than I am, but there's going to be some potential for some darker moments, and I want to have some lightness and some levity at times, especially opening this up. Because also the relationship between Beatrix and her boss, Cal, is going to be super petty on both sides, which will add some levity as our main character kind of has to grow up a little bit. But so this hopefully is going to give the reader a sense right off the bat about some of the rules of how these two dimensions work together and some of the problems and complications that go with that, and give a sense of the tone. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, because with this one, I really, aside from the world building, I was kind of just like, well, what am I left with story-wise? Because a lot of the original story that centered around Sage, that was the mystery. That was what Beatrix was working through, was figuring out what had been going on. So even though, yes, the two stories needed to be separated, they weren't working together. When I started looking at, okay, how do I restart this Karmic investigation book, which I still don't have a title for, or the series name, that's not good either. I was like, well, what exactly is the story now? Like, I have this character, I have these worlds that I'm figuring out on starting to develop, but what is she doing? What is this first book about? I had no idea. So I had to sit with that for a while. I had some sense of I wanted to start in kind of a confined community where it would be easy enough to recognize that something wasn't right, but subtle enough that nobody really knows what it is. And I kind of had the sense that I wanted at least part of this to be like in an office setting, because interactions with coworkers are always so weird. There's a lot of drama that plays out in a workplace, especially I think in like a close workspace where everyone's kind of in each other's way a lot. Because even with teaching, I work in a school and we've all got our own classrooms and spaces, but there's still a lot of complicated interactions and trying to navigate different systems that can cause a lot of conflict. So I wanted that kind of like boiled down in a smaller sphere that I could use. And I'm still kind of piecing together all of the details of where I think I want this to go, but it's going to be kind of a small-ish town. It's not going to be a murder mystery. Because I don't want to set that up right in the first book, because I think if I do kind of like a murder mystery type thing in book 1, then that will set the expectation that that's what every book is going to be. And really, I want this to be a pretty wide variety of mysteries. So you really don't know as the reader what each one is going to be about. Is it going to be someone being murdered? Is, this a tragedy on a grander scale? Like, what's going on in each book? I want to leave that open so I can really kind of play with it and experiment a lot as I'm developing the different storylines throughout the series. So this one will not be murder, but I think it will be illness related and something that is causing the illness that is starting to affect this town, that they don't really realize what's happening, but it is causing a disturbance big enough that the karmic world has taken notice, and they're concerned that this is going to quickly get out of hand and start causing problems for them. So I'm still working out those details, but it is starting to come together, and I think I've gotten a fairly good amount of world building and character building worked out. And one of the things I noticed as I just completely restarted this from scratch, I didn't even reread what I had written to get a sense of Beatrix's character again. I was just like, no, like this is really a different story. So I'm just going to jump right in and start it and see where it goes. And the funny thing is that surprised me is Beatrix is already a pretty different character. Just having sat with her character in my head and worked through some of like, what is her backstory? Why does she have this petty conflict-ridden relationship with her boss? Like, where did that come from? As I started building a lot of those details and talking through it with Chris, some pieces started falling into place, and that started to give me a much better sense of who she is and what are her personal stakes in all of this. Because she is very skilled at her job. She's a really good investigator, but she's working with Cal, who sucks at his job and is a terrible supervisor. He was an even worse investigator, and I'm sure many of us have experienced that sometimes the people who are bad at actually doing their job get shoved up the ladder as a supervisor so they're not screwing up the job that they weren't good at as much. So kind of like that level removed. But why we think making those people supervisors is a good idea, who knows? Because it usually isn't. And that's the case with Cal. He was a really bad investigator, but I'm thinking he's got kind of some people in his corner to where he's not going to get fired for being incompetent. He's just going to get shuffled around to where he can do less damage. And so in part, he's already jealous of Beatrix. He doesn't like her because she's better than him at pretty much everything. And like, he wanted to be a good investigator. He's just not a good one. And so he already had that like negative energy toward her because he's just jealous of her skill and her determination to really like figure things out and do well. But I was like, that's not enough for him to like carry on and to risk his job, because at some point, even those kind of people, eventually they're awful enough that there are consequences. So I think we're gonna have kind of some backstory that we learn more about, some in this book, but we'll get deeper into it later when they really have to kind of like confront each other. But I'm building this backstory of them where there is this professional conflict, but there's also some really petty personal conflict. And I haven't decided exactly what it is yet, but it's going to be something just like honestly kind of ridiculous, where it's like she snubbed cupcakes that his wife made or something, that he was just like, it's the last straw. I can't stand her. And now she, won't even eat a cupcake that my wife made. Something dumb like that has just kind of like grown and grown and grown over time. And like Beatrix probably doesn't even know that this is a thing in his head. She just thinks he's petty. And so every time he does something lousy to her, like shoving her into a human body in the middle of a presentation to fourth graders, her petty hatred of him grows and grows and grows. So she's a very good investigator. She's got all these amazing skills, but she also has some personality flaws, like harboring this petty hatred and letting it get to her more than it should. And then to add another layer to it, again, I haven't fully pinned down exactly what I'm going to want her big failure to be. But the reason she's stuck with Cal is that a previous mission, and this in their time, their timeline is much longer than humans. So this could be 100 or 200 years ago even. But at some point, she screwed up a really big mission. She did not stop the karmic disruption, and it boiled over into something that affected tons of people, like the Black Plague, or not convincing Hitler to go a different path, or, the pandemic, something like that, where, and not necessarily even that she screwed up, but just that she couldn't do it. Like it was already too far gone by the time she was sent in, and by the time she could like piece all the different factors together to really make a difference, it was too late. And so she couldn't stop it. And that's like this big black mark on her that she can't see her way out of yet. She's still being punished for it. She was put with Cal. In part, he is really terrible, and they knew like she'd still generally do pretty well, even with a lousy supervisor. But, they're also, well, you failed. So she's kind of been demoted to these lesser cases. But they seem like lesser cases, but they're going to turn out to be a bit more involved and complex, because that's what's going to make the story good. So we've got a lot of personal parts of the story that I think are going to add a lot of layers and build these characters up to be more complex than what I had originally. And that layers into a more complex world with a lot going on, with the interplay between the 3 different dimensions rather than just the 2. And it's going to push all of the karmic and not karmic characters to eventually have to like rethink what their role is in this like trifecta of interplay of power between these 3 dimensions. And the humans are kind of, oblivious, and they don't know what's going on. I think most likely, even though each human can interact with the agent, at least the karmic agent, the non-karmic agents don't interact, unless it's maybe like in a creepy way, like they're a ghost or something, or demonic spirit. But generally, like the karmic agents will be able to interact to help piece together information and figure things out. But once they leave the human body, that human mind forgets that part. So kind of a safety mechanism built in. So otherwise, eventually most of the humans would just know that they all existed, because they'd do enough dumb or terrible stuff that they'd interact. So the humans stay generally oblivious that these other 2 worlds exist, because their memories are basically wiped of that part of the interaction when an agent leaves a host body. So the humans are kind of pawns, but they're also driving all of the problems and the good stuff too, because when the humans do good things, they influence the karmic nature for good to balance out against some of the crappier things that people do. And I think that that's not something that really is considered by the karmic world, because they view humans as stupid and not very selfless and kind of like children or animals. Like, oh, they don't even understand like the problems that they're calling. They're just too immature or unintelligent to realize that the harm that they cause. So they kind of view them like that. Some of them, like Beatrix, has a better view of the humans. But in general, they don't really see or recognize any value in like encouraging goodness in the humans. They have like a one-sided view to them. And so that may be something that I play with over the course of time of like, what exactly is their role? How do all of these three groups of people really view who they are and what their purpose is and what's really going on? Like, why are these three worlds connected? So it'll be interesting to see, because even with just having thought through some of those backstories and the world ideas, I'd started off with Beatrix in the original version being a pretty compassionate person, thoughtful, measured, professional. Whereas when I jumped into this one with dropping her into the body of someone giving a talk to fourth graders at career day and ending up kind of stumbling her way through a discussion about poop and making some kids cry along the way, her personality started to come through, and she's still very competent and good at her job, but she's a bit bitter with how she's been punished for something she doesn't see as her fault. And the pettiness with Cal kind of shows through a little bit. And like, she's still someone who is going to do her very best, but she's not super sympathetic toward humans. She doesn't particularly like small children. She's just like, ugh, gross and annoying. And so we're getting a little bit more of a complex personality that has some background to it. I'm finding it just as me writing her, I'm finding it more interesting to get to know her than I did in the previous version, because the previous version was so focused on the mystery and her connecting with some of the emotional challenges that the character, the one she was investigating, was facing, that it was drawing out this more like serious, compassionate side of her. Whereas in this one, starting off with a crazy situation with a lousy boss who has put her into it, is opening up some of the pettier but also sillier, and opening up some humor and some lightness in the story that I definitely didn't have in the other one, and really like still don't. I took a break from the other version because I was like, man, yeah, I needed to get my headspace somewhere else, because it is very serious. It deals with a lot of complicated issues of faith and belief and sexuality and family and where those connections are and what you owe each other and all of that. It's pushing me to kind of dig up and get into some of the things that like I grew up with, particularly with faith and trying to navigate the cognitive dissonance that created. So I needed a little bit of a break from that. I think me as the writer, I need the karmic side of this dual project to be lighter and to have these moments of like just silliness and getting out some of the like venting and dealing with, just the everyday stuff that you have to battle that gets on your nerves. But underlying all of that is this more serious problem of figuring out what the karmic disturbance is and how to fix it. So there's still a goal. There's a focus that Beatrix needs to get through, but we're going to have some fun along the way, sometimes at her expense, sometimes just the situation and the craziness of it. But I'm enjoying getting to know her personality and finding that she is so different and fun to work with in a way that she wasn't in the other story, because that just wasn't what the other story needed. It will be interesting to see. Lots of fun things have already come up in this. I only have, 2.5 pages written of the Karmic book, which comes out to just over 1,300 words. But I feel like it's a good start. There'll probably be some revision, maybe trying to add a little bit more humor and really working on that, because that's not something like I feel like I'm super strong in. So it will take some intentionality to make sure that I can maintain some humor over the course of this story. But just, it's fun and I'm enjoying it. It's a good break from working on the other side as well. And I think next time, in the next episode, I will go back to kind of talking about where I'm at on the other one, because I am actually several chapters in. I don't have the file up, but I think I'm like 6 or 7 chapters in. And I know where the next 2 chapters need to go on that one. I needed a break from working on that. And I've been on Christmas break and I had a bunch of other stuff I needed to like catch up on and just get done and spend time with family over the holidays. So I think I will kind of be moving back into that one next. And I'll give you guys an update and kind of wrap things up as far as what I've already accomplished on that one before I get back into writing some new stuff. So it's been really interesting restarting the karmic side of this story. I'm interested to see where it goes because even though I've done a lot of planning, I still don't have all the answers and it's bound to surprise me here and there still. And hopefully it will surprise readers and keep them interested too. In the meantime, I will be back hopefully soon. I'm going to try to at least get one more episode recorded before I head back to work next week. So fingers crossed on that. So if you are interested in what I already have out there, I'm kind of going through this whole long thing over 2026 and probably into the year after that. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, I got married, I changed my name, and I have decided, even though it's probably more than slightly crazy, I am going to be pulling all of my books one at a time, one series at a time anyway. And I'm going to be republishing them under a publishing company name that I'm opening and under my new name, DelSheree Spinner. There's a lot of reasons behind that, which I will get into on my blog and newsletter. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and sign up either on Substack or I have my newsletter link all over the place. I'm going to be kind of explaining that whole decision process and what's going on there. So if you see things, if you go looking for my stuff, I'm slowly shifting everything from DelSheree Gladden to DelSheree Spinner. I've already started that on my website. So you can find me at DelShereeSpinner.com. And I'm trying to get most of my social media stuff changed. Facebook is being a pain in the butt about it. But one or the other, you'll find me as I go through and start changing up links and republishing everything. So things might be a bit of a mess for a while, but I will eventually get it all sorted out. And hopefully in the next year or 2, more likely, I will have everything transitioned over to DelSheree Spinner. And I will hopefully have several new projects out this year to go along with that. Thank you guys for listening. This has been fun catching up and letting you know where everything is at. So keep writing if you're reading, find a good book to read. I'd love to hear about what you're reading and what has kept you interested and busy over the holidays. I'll be back soon.